Good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll be dealing with the Jacobean period and the Puritan era. So it spans from 1603 to 1660. Jacobean period was the reign of James I. Uh, Even though Shakespeare started writing his plays during the Elizabethan age, he continued his literary career in the reign of James I. So James first ascended the throne. He was the James VI of Scotland before he became James I of England. He established Stuart dynasty in England. So James first established Stuart dynasty in England, and he was a believer of divine right. He believed that God has what God has given the right to rule to a monarch. So that is divine right there. That is the monarch is a God's messenger, or the monarch is a God's representative. He believed that. He believed in the divine right theory. The Puritan age was from 1620 to 1660, and it was named after the rise of Puritan movement in the 17th century England. It was also the age of John Milton. So the Puritans were a group of Protestant believers of pure Christianity. That is, they wanted their own church and they wanted a religious reformation movement. That is, they were dissatisfied with the religious reformation movement carried out during the reign of Elizabeth I. They wanted a complete purification of the Church of England. So Puritan age is again divided into two classes: the Jacobean period under the reign of James I and Caroline period under the reign of Charles I. So period of civil war, it was from 1642 to 51. The Puritans emerged as a strong political force, and they indulged in a series of conflict between Charles I and the parliamentarians. So the parliament mainly comprised of the Puritan Middle Ages. But Charles I believed that the monarch is the superior power. He believed in the divine right to rule, and but the parliament demanded for a constitutional monarchy. So this resulted in chaos, and this led to the civil war. Charles was refused it, and he ruled without a power. That is, he completely abandoned the parliament, and he ruled without a parliament for 11 years. So these 11 years without the absence, with the absence of parliament, is called 11 years tyranny. That was from 1629 to 40. So the civil war finally ended in 1651, and it was the victory of the parliamentarians. So Oliver Cromwell ascended the throne of England. Charles I was executed, and his son Charles II fled to France. So the Commonwealth of England was from 1649 to 53. Oliver Cromwell was the leader of the Protectorate. The establishment of a protectorate was a victory for the Puritans. So Puritans remained in rule until 1660. After that, Charles II returned and claimed his throne. So the protectorate under Oliver Cromwell was the prolific time for the Puritans. There were complete abandonment of culture, arts, etc. Puritan rule were established during this time. Then literature of the Jacobean era. So Elizabethan and Jacobeans are found to overlap and mingle up in the matter of literature. That is, this era's significant work is King James version of Bible. That is very, very important. It is asked for most of the net exams. That is, you will be asked to arrange a few books chronologically. So James version of Bible will be one among it, and it will be 16. That is the year 1611 is the was the production of King James version of Bible. So that is, the work was published in 1611. It has been called the miracle of English prose. So King James Bible was called the miracle of the English prose. The year is very important. King James version of Bible was published in the year 1611. So drama was the major genre of Jacobean era. Poetry included the graceful verse of Johnson and Cavalier poets, and also the intellectual complexity of metaphysical poetry by John Donne was also a famous movement during this period. So the Cavaliers, Metaphysicals, etc. were there. Then Jacobean drama consists of three genres. They are the revenge tragedy, city comedy, tragic comedy, masks and anti-masks. So, revenge tragedy such as Webster's White Devil, The Duchess of Malfi, and Shakespeare's Hamlet, etc. were revenge tragedies. City comedies included citizens comedies. It means citizen comedy. Romantic comedy and humoral comedy give way to city comedies. That is, they are the satirical comedies based on London life. So, the primary plot dealt with greed and sexual intrigue. The Night of the Burning Pestle, Johnson's Bartholomew Fair, Middleton's A Chaste Maid in Cheapside, etc. were branded under the category of city comedy. Then tragic comedy was a mix of comedy and tragedy. It had improbable, complicated plot and unnatural settings. Characters of high social class or nobility were there. Love was the central theme of tragicomedy. Masks and anti-masks. Masks are courtly entertainment performed by aristocratic amateurs. That is, it was performed for relishing in private. So, courtly entertainment performed by aristocratic amateurs involving music, dancing, and pageantry. So, it was symbolic of the majesty of the king and aristocracy. Ben Jonson was a pioneer in writing mask and anti-mask. I think we already discussed that the Mask of Beauty and the Mask of Blackness by Ben Jonson. And anti-mask was also introduced by Ben Jonson. Remember, both mask and anti-mask were popularized by Ben Jonson. So, anti-masks were performed by professional actors, whereas masks were performed by amateur actors. The Mask of Queens is an example of anti-mask. And the dramatists of the old school of Jacobean age included Dekker, Heywood, Vehement, and Fletcher. The satiric group included Chapman, Johnson, Marston, Middleton, and Downer. Antoine Artaud, he's a modernist. Modernist. He appreciated Jacobean tragedies as models for his theatre of cruelty. So Antoine Artaud's The Theatre of Cruelty is famous, and he was influenced by the Jacobean tragedies. Then we look at some of the important playwrights: Francis Bierman and John Fletcher. So they're important for works. Philoster or Love Life's Bleeding. I think we have already discussed it, but it was Philoster or Love Life's Bleeding is important. The first of the tragic comedies of Bierman and Fletcher. Philoster is the heir to the Sicilian throne, whose position has been usurped. He is in love with the usurper's daughter, Arethusa. Arethusa is courted by the boastful Spanish prince Paramount the villain. So, Philoster, just remember, Philoster or Love Lies Bleeding is written by Francis Beaumont and John Fletcher. Again, the Maid's Tragedy was written by them. The Captain, The King and Knocking, Cupid's Revenge, The Noble Gentleman, Love's Pilgrimage, and The Scornful Lady. You don't have to study all this, but just have a look at this slide, because you should know, you should be able to identify if any of these names were asked. At least you should be able to eliminate the options. So just have a look at the slide. Don't need to study all this. Remember, Philoster or Love Lies Bleeding is important. It's a tragedy comedy. When Thomas Heywood was called the Prose Shakespeare by Charles Lamb. He was born in England and was educated at Cambridge. In his preface to the play The English Traveller, he claims to have written 220 plays. Okay. It was supposed to, like, he was supposed to have written 220 plays, and The Four Apprentices of London, and two domestic tragedies such as A Woman Killed with Kindness and The English Traveller. A Woman Killed with Kindness and English Traveller are tragedies written by him. In A Woman Killed with Kindness, the plot is like a happy marriage is broken when the wife is seduced by the husband's friend. So husband sends the wife away to live with servants. Sinning wife is repentant and broken-hearted and tries to starve herself to death. husband reunites with her, restoring the social and patriarchal order. So that is a woman killed with kindness. And in the English Traveller, hero is in love with a woman who is again happily married to an old man. They will marry only after the old man's death. Meanwhile, she is seduced by the hero's friend. And when the sin is discovered, she dies and she is repentant of her crime. So, A Woman Killed with Kindness and English Traveller are written by Thomas Heywood. Thomas Decker's The Shoemaker's Holiday is important. It was a city comedy centered on Simon Eyre, a shoemaker. So, it derives the plot from Thomas Delany's The Gentle Craft. Satire Mastics, you should remember the name. And All Fortunatus is also a play written by Thomas Dekker. The Wonderful Year and Westward Ho and Northward Ho was written by Webster and Dekker together. So it was under the collaboration of Thomas Dekker and Webster. Westward Ho and Northward Ho was written. The Roaring Girl and Honest Whore are other important plays. The Honest Whore is a story of a prostitute Bella Front. She redeems herself after she is married by her seducer, but later she is asked to once again go back to her original profession by her husband. So, but she remains steadfast in her virtue. So, it is a story of a prostitute Bella Front. Now, John Webster is very, very important. Even for PG, you will have to study the Duchess of Malby or White Devil. Both the plays are important. They are the two revenge tragedies. Little information is about, like, we have very little information about his life. And T.S. Eliot admired him. So, his two revenge tragedies, The White Devil and The Duchess of Malfi, is really important. Uh, so, The White Devil is centered on Victoria Corombana and the Duke of Branciano. It is about their affair. They are in a relationship. The Duke kills Victoria's husband and his wife, Isabella. After that, the Duke and Victoria gets married, but Isabella's brothers, that is the Duke's ex-wife's brothers kill them. Okay, so ends with both of them getting killed by Isabella's brother. So, The Duchess of Malfi was a unique play. That is, it revolves around a widowed duchess who marries her steward. That is, she marries below her status, and she marries her steward Antonio, and she secretly begots two children. And the play ends with the main characters killing each other. But we have to look at some more details of the play. The Duchess of Malfi was written by John Webster in 1623. The Duchess was a recently widowed woman. She was in love with her lovely steward, Antonio, and she secretly marries him and bears his children. But her two brothers, Ferdinand and a corrupt cardinal, they somehow know about the affair, and they entrust a man named Bassola, to spy on her. So the Duchess takes Bassola into confidence. She thinks that Bassola is a trustworthy man, but Bassola is a spy entrusted by her brothers, Ferdinand and the Cardinal. So the Duchess, along with her two children, is killed. Only her husband and one of the sons escape. In the end, almost all the characters gets killed. So the play is set in the 16th century. At the beginning, Antonio, that is the Duchess' husband, has returned home from France, and Ferdinand and the Cardinal are visiting the Duchess. The Duchess has a faithful maid, Cariola, and Antonio's friend Delio are also important characters. So the Duchess wooing and marrying her steward Antonio is the reversal of male or female roles and class distinctions. When Bezzola suspects that the Duchess is pregnant, what happens is that he gives her apricots to induce labor. To protect Antonio by removing him from Malfi, the Duchess falsely claims that he has stolen from her and hence has him banished to Ancona. So what happens is that her brothers came to know of this and they came to punish her To make the Duchess insane with despair, Ferdinand presents her with wax corpses of her family. Imagine her plight. So he presents her with wax corpses of her family to convince her that they have died. The Duchess is strangled to death and she dies fearlessly. So Ferdinand shows signs of insanity. A psychological, uh, he had a psychological imbalance. That is, he was afflicted with lycanthropia, or the belief that he is a wolf. So it was a strange disease. And the cardinal's mistress Julia declares to Bussola her obsessive love for him. But the cardinal came to know about this and she kills Julia by giving her a poisoned Bible. So Bussola takes revenge on the cardinal and Ferdinand, and a haunting echo comes from the Duchess' tomb. A haunting echo comes from the Duchess's tomb that seems to repeat in the Duchess's voice selected words from what Antonio and Delio speak. The echo adds to the feeling of inevitability of Antonio's death. So there is no clear avenger. That is, Bussola is the scheming. The Bussola, Cardinal, and Ferdinand are the scheming person. The innocent Duchess and her husband and their entire family is destroyed. It's such a violent play. So that is the Duchess of Malfi. The White Devil is also important. Thomas Middleton. So Thomas Middleton wrote A Chase Made in Cheapside. It was a city comedy. It centered around the marriage of Moll Yellowhammer. A game at chess was a comedy. That is, it was. That is, the prologue explains that the forthcoming stage play will be based on a game of chess, with chess pieces representing men and the state. The cost of Ignatius Loyola appears in the introduction of the play. Black King and his men represent Spain, and the Jesuits are checkmated by the White Knight, Prince Charles. So there is an anti-Spanish tone in the play. It gained enormous popularity because England was in war with Spain at that time. So it closed after 9 performances because it had such an inflammatory anti-Spanish content. So this resulted in the Spanish ambassador's outrage. As a result, the performance of this play was stopped. And the Changeling is about it's a tragedy written in 1622 along with William Rowley. So it is about Beatrice Joanna. Beatrice loves Alonso. Sorry, Beatrice loves Alcimero, but she is betrothed to Alonso. She doesn't want to marry Alonso, so she uses D. Flores, that is her servant, to murder Alonso, her fiancé. But once she commits a crime, she finds that she is at this mercy of D. Flores. So she has to yield to him. She became his mistress. She dies addressing her father, and her dying words are echoed in T.S. Eliot's Gerontion, the poem Gerontion addresses. It's about uh, Beatrice dying words. So that is the Changeling. And Women Beware Women is the only tragedy that Thomas Middleton brought along. So it is about Bianca Capello, who became the mistress of Francisco de' Medici, the second Grand Duke of Tuscany. So Bianca is in love with Francisco de' Medici. He is a duke. And finally, the play ends with a bloody mask, where it is a scene where everyone dies. The play famously uses the device of a game of chess to denote stages in seduction. That is, Bianca's mother-in-law is playing chess with Livia, another woman. So, meanwhile, the Duke is seducing Bianca in the another room. So, it is symbolically represented through the game of chess. Then, John Marston, History of Mathematics, what you will. The malcontent is important because it is dedicated to Ben Jonson. That is, it is about a deposed duke who returns to his dukedom in disguise as Malvolio and he vents his bitterness by cynically assisting his usurper. So this play is dedicated to Ben Jonson. It has a meta-theatrical induction in which the play's actors and its onstage spectators comment on the drama that is to follow. It is actually a postmodern technique, but it was employed in this drama at that time. Then John Ford, The Broken Heart, It's a Pity She's Out, Perkin Warburg. Cyril Jonas, The Revenger's Tragedy and the Atheist Tragedy is important. Philip Messenger wrote A New Way to Pay All Debts and The City Madam. So, Robert Burton was a scholar at Oxford. He had knowledge of diverse subjects, including mathematics, astrology, and humoral physiology. His only book is this is very, very important. This was asked frequently for the NET exams. I think for the past 3 or 4 years, I have seen this question. The Anatomy of Melancholy in 1621. Again, it will be asked to arrange chronologically or some specific details from the book is asked. So, the Anatomy of Melancholy. It was the first edition was in 1621 and the later edition came in 1651. It was written under the pseudonym Democritus Jr. Democritus means laughing philosopher. And this laughing philosopher writing about melancholy was ironic. So it is a philosophical discussion of the possibilities of human happiness. It comprises of three major sections and two kinds of melancholy is discussed in the treatise, that is love melancholy and religious melancholy. So it concludes that the whole world, including himself, is mad, and also describes four different temperaments arising from four humors in human body. Metaphysical poetry, and again metaphysical poetry is a very important area. The term metaphysical poets was coined by Dr. Samuel Johnson. It was to describe a loose group of 17th century English poets whose works were influenced by John Donne. Dryden was the first to use the term metaphysics. Donne's poetry affects the metaphysics. John Donne, Abraham Cowley, George Herbert, then Henry Vaughan, Andrew Marvell, and Richard Crashaw are the important poets. So, Dryden was the first to use the term metaphysics, and Dr. Johnson applied the term metaphysical to this group. They followed rough rhythms of speech, heated arguments, they were witty, cynical, metaphysical conceits were used, as opposed to the romantic, idealized Petrarchan conceit. Intellectual kind of witticism and shocking, dramatic style were used. Carpe diem philosophy was followed, that is, they believed in seizing the moment. So, these are the characteristic features of metaphysical poetry: elaborate similes and metaphors, extended poetic conceits and paradox, and rough rhythms of speech, use of witty and metaphysical conceits, dramatic styles, exaggerated similes, carpe diem philosophy, that is, seize the day, to enjoy the moment. I think Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress employs this carpe diem philosophy, that is, the lover is rushed by the lover to engage in lovemaking. Unified Sensibility by Eliot discusses about the metaphysicals, that is, feel their thoughts and think their feelings. So Walter Scott also criticized metaphysical poets that they played with thoughts as the Elizabethans had played with words. So these were more intellectual in nature. John Donne was a contemporary of Shakespeare and Marlowe. His works consist of elegies, satires, epigrams, and religious pieces. The Progress of the Soul and Anatomy of the World are important works. Then his poetry strikingly departed from conventions of the 16th century, especially the Petrarchan verse. No images of nature, no allusions to classical mythology was employed, no idealized view of human nature was employed, directness of language, it was easy and fluent. I think most of you might have studied The Flea, The Canonization, Hymn to Godfather, The Relic, Valediction, Forbidding Morning, Sun Rising, and Love's Alchemy. Holy sonnets are his divine meditations. It was written in later career, published posthumously. There were 19 holy sonnets. So, how many holy sonnets were there? 19. They were intensely personal and concerned with death. Sonnet number 10 is Death Be Not Proud, and sonnet number 14 is Batten My Heart. Abraham Cowley, he formed the irregular ode. Remember, Abraham Cowley formed the irregular ode. Life of Cowley is the first in Dr. Johnson's Lives of Poets. So, Abraham Cowley was a child prodigy. That is, he was a scholar from his childhood. So, he wrote many of the works such as The Mistress, Davies, Pindaric Chords of Myself, Ode Upon Blessed Restoration, The Civil War. And his major contribution was in forming the irregular ode. So, Andrew Marvell, he was a poet and satirist. He was Milton's secretary, and he was appointed as the Latin secretary to the Council of State. So, he became a friend of Milton. Then, To His Coy Mistress is a major poem, that is, a man talks to a woman who is hesitant in love. If they had more time and space, this shyness wouldn't be a crime. Then he would have complimented her part by part. But time is short for them, death is approaching. So it is better that they engage in lovemaking, and it is a time for them. They cannot stop the sun in any case, but their love they can make time fly. So that is to his mistress. It employs a carpe diem philosophy, that is to seize the day. Upon Appleton's House, The Definition of Love, The Garden, and Mower Poems is a series of 4 pastoral poems, were his major contribution. The George Herbert was a contemporary of John Donne, the finest of religious metaphysicals. His important work is The Temple, Sacred Poems and Private Ejaculations. It is a collection of 160 religious poems. He wrote this on his deathbed, and he asked his friend Nicholas Ferrer to either burn it or publish it. So, the temple, sacred poems, and private ejaculations, redemption, the altar, the collar, the pulley, the pilgrimage, and he has employed pattern poetry in his wing Easter Wings. In his poem Easter Wings. Richard Crashaw wrote Steps to the Temple and Delight of the Muses. So, George Herbert wrote The Temple, Sacred Poems, and Private Ejaculations. Richard Crashaw wrote Steps to the Temple. Henry Vaughan wrote The Retreat, Silax Sentinels, The Waterfall, The World, and The Night are other important works. Now, Cavalier poets, a group of English poets who gathered at the court of Charles I. They were the supporters of Charles, that is why they were called Cavalier poets. They believed in the ideal Renaissance man who was a lover, soldier, gallant, and man of affairs. They celebrated the idealized relationship between Charles I and his queen, upheld Platonism. He includes Herrick, Carew, Valor, Suckling, and Lovelace. We'll look at each of them. Herrick was a disciple of Ben Jonson. So he was a Cavalier poet as well as metaphysical poet. Hesperids is his major work. Remember the subtitle of Hesperids, the works both human and divine of Robert Herrick. So it was dedicated to the Prince of Wales. It consists of 1,200 poems and it employs carpe diem themes. So major poems are To Daffodils, to Viola, to Violets, to Electra, Oberon's Feast, Upon Julia's Close, To the Western Winds, and Ode to Ben Jonson is important. An ode to Ben Jonson. Thomas Carew, once again a Cavalier and metaphysical. He was influenced by the school of Johnson and Donne. So his first country house poem was To Saxon. Actually, there's no further explanation about this because these are all literary facts. You have to study it like this. So Carew's first country house poem was To Saxon, and A Rapture was another poem. That is, in this poem, he described the body of his beloved to a country. But this resulted in a banning of the poem because of the sexual innuendos. So, Coelum Britannicum to Ben Jonson was written by Thomas Carew. An Ode to the Ben Jonson was written by Robert Herrick, and To Ben Jonson was written by Thomas Carey. He also wrote an elegy upon the death of John Donne. So Edmund Waller was another important poet. He wrote close couplets like Dryden and Pope. His best known works are On a Girdle, Go Lovely Rose, and On St. James Park. It is a topographical poem about the space, St. James Park. So, To the King upon His Majesty's happy return, Divine Poem. The second part of Mr. Waller's poem are rather important in his collection. John Suckling was also a disciple of Johnson and Donne. The Wills are sections of the poet, accounts of religion by reason, a Glaura, a tragedy, the Goblins, a musical comedy, and his are some of his works. The major poems include Ballad upon a Wedding, Why So Pale and Man, Fond Lover. Richard Lovelace was impressed by King Charles I and Queen Henrietta. He was imprisoned during the war, and his famous work was Lucasta, which was published in 1649. So he wrote poems such as To Lucasta, Going to the Wars, and To Althea from Prison. That is famous. Then John Milton is an important writer from this period. He was a lonely figure, not belonging to any movement. He was a polyglot, that is, he was a scholar. He had broadly Protestant views. He was a Puritan. He was born in Bread Street, Cheapside. His father was a scrivener or copyist. So he studied at St. Paul's School, and later he went to Christ College, Cambridge. He was known as the Lady of Christ. Lady of Christ was John Milton because of his hair and delicate manners. So he was a Puritan, and then he wrote his earliest formal poem, Ode on the Death of a Fair Infant Dying of a Cough. It was written in 1628 at the age of 20. Then, at his time, he wrote the first of his Latin elegy, Elegia Prima. It is first of his Latin elegies, Elegia Prima. So he wrote the Nativity Ode on the morning of Christ's nativity. The epitaph on the admirable dramatic poet William Shakespeare, that is on Shakespeare. The poem on Shakespeare was also written by him. It was Milton's first published poem. So Milton's first published poem was on Shakespeare. L'Allegro and Il Pensiero were companion poems. They were pastoral companion poems. L'Allegro means happy man, and Penseroso means melancholy man. It is written in octosyllabic couplets. So, Horton poems, that is, he spent 6 years after his Cambridge education at his parents' house, and there he wrote 6 poems On Time, At the Solemn Music, Upon Circumcision, Lycidas, etc. Masque Arcades is a masque written by him. It is written in praise of Alice Spencer, who was the Countess Dowager of Derby, and the music was written by Henry Lewis. So, Comus is another important masque. It is a masque presented at Ludlow Castle, 1634, on Michaelmas night. The Comus was written in blank verse, anonymously published. It was anonymously published in 1637. It shows life as a Puritan struggle for the victory of the virtues. Love virtue, she alone is free, is a famous line. Lycidas is a pastoral elegy written by Milton in 1637 to a memorial collection of elegies for his friend Edward King, who has died at a young age. Edward King was a young man of great promise, destined for church, but he had drowned in the Irish Sea. So, classical, Christian, and personal elements fuse here. Inspiration of Theocritus, from whom the name Lycidas is taken. So it reflects the uncertainty and torment in Milton's mind and reveals Milton's radical Puritan politics as well. So Lycidas is dedicated to his friend Edward King, who had died in the Irish Sea. It was written in Spenserian stanzas. Then another pastoral elegy, Epitaphium Damonis, was written by him. And about his prose works, that is, he had a turbulent marriage at that time. In 1643, at the age of 35, he married a 16-year girl called Mary Popple. But this marriage didn't last, and this led to the writing of divorce tracts by him. So divorce tracts were written. Milton argued that divorce should be granted to mismatched couples. So anti-proleptical tracts was also written. He began to write prose tracts against episcopacy in the Puritan and parliamentary course. He wrote 5 anti-proleptical or anti-episcopal tracts on the reformation of church government. Of Reformation was one among them. Then Of Education was also written by him. It was in the form of a letter to Samuel Hadley, a scholar and educational reformer. He urged the reform of universities, and he outlined an ideal curriculum for this. So, Areopagitica is very, very important. It is again asked for frequently for NET exams and common entrance exams. Areopagitica was published in 1644. That is due to Milton's controversial views on marriage and divorce. There was a ban, that is, the Parliament issued a licensing order on 1643, which instituted pre publishing censorship. Due to this censorship, what happened is that um, against the censorship, Milton wrote Areopagitica. It's a classical defense of the freedom of press. So Areopagitica is important. Remember the year also, 1644. It was a classic defense of the freedom of press. It was issued against the licensing order of 1643. And it was titled after a speech written by the Athenian orator Isocrates in 5th century BC. So he believes that freedom of press is God's will. Biblical and classical references strengthen his argument. Iconoclast is another important work. It is an anti-monarchical tract. Okay, he was a Puritan, so he was against the ascending of throne by Charles I. So he tried to shatter the image of Charles I. Then History of Britain, it was an incomplete work. Then Artis Logicae on Christian doctrine. A collection of his poems were divided into English and Latin. He identifies himself as the future poet. Then comes his magnum opus, Paradise Lost. Remember the year? Paradise Lost was written in the year 1667. Paradise Regained was in the year 1671, and Samson Agonistes was also published in the year 1671. So Paradise Lost is very, very important. It begins with the lines of man's first disobedience. So it was published in 1667. Uh, Originally, it was conceived as a tragedy called Adam and Paradise. It was asked once in net exam, what was the original name of Paradise Lost? It was Adam and Paradise. He was originally conceived Paradise Lost as a tragedy called Adam and Paradise. Later, it became his magnum opus. So, book one is about Satan and his followers building their house of parliament called Pandemonium. In book two, Satan opens a debate in Pandemonium. In book three, God foresees the imminent danger to mankind by Satan and creates a remedy for man's fall. His son, Jesus Christ, will conquer the death. Uriel directs Satan to earth when he disguises himself as a cherub and tricks Uriel. He wants to see Adam and Eve. So Uriel, Uriel directs Satan to earth and he disguises as a cherub and tricks the guardian angel Uriel. In book 4, Satan enters the Garden of Eden through the Mount Nifades and disguises himself as a cormorant and dog. In book 5, Raphael, the guardian angel, warns man of the imminent danger by Satan. In book 6, a warning is again given to Adam and Eve against the possible attempt of Satan to seduce man. In Book 7, the creation of the new world and of Adam and Eve is described. Book 7 is the shortest book, and Book 9 is the longest. So Book 8 is about Adam inquires about the heavenly bodies, and Raphael answers as far as he could perceive. Then Raphael warns Adam once again and leaves. Book 9, in spite of all the warning, the fall happens. Adam and Eve is dedicated to the status of mere human beings. They are expelled from paradise to earth. Book 10 is about the Son of God comes down to Eden and pronounces the infliction of punishment on man. Book 9, the Son intercedes the Father on the behalf of man. Book 12, Michael leads Adam and Eve to the gates of Eden, tells them about the future coming of Christ. And they go forth sad, yet they are consoled with the hope of salvation at end. So Paradise Lost, that is, originally it was conceived in 10 books, later it was rearranged in 12 books. It was printed in 1667 with explanatory notes. It was the first poem to be published in that manner. So the subject of the poem is Fall of Man. It attempts to justify the way of God to man. Classical echoes mingle with stark English simplicities and a Christian purpose. So he invokes Muse 4 times as heavenly muse, holy light, Urania, the muse of astronomy, and Urania, the celestial patroness. Invoke the muse 4 times. So that term was to justify the ways of God to men. The fall is believed to be partly fortunate. It is also called Felix Culpa or fortunate mistake. So it reinstates the importance of obedience to God. Satan in Paradise Lost is a powerful character, and Dryden called Milton the poetical sons of Spenser in preface to the fables. So many of the critics criticized him for the magnificent character of Satan. So Paradise Lost was written in blank verse. 10 books were there in the first edition. 12 books were there in the second edition. It deals with the fall of men. Book 7 is the shortest. Book 9 is the longest one. Then Book 7 describes the creation of Adam and Eve. Book 9 is about their fall. So Paradise Regained was published in 1671. It was based on the Gospel of Luke. So it was published along with Samson Agonistes. Christ is the protagonist and temptation is the theme. So, but it doesn't have the effect of Paradise Lost. Then Samson Agonistes was written as a tragic closer drama, which was written for only for the private performances. So it was modeled on a Greek tragedy. Agonistes means champion. It is allegorical of Milton's own life. That is Samson Agonistes. He was a powerful Greek warrior. But what happens is that he lost, that is, he is arrested by Hithen Philistines. His strength is in his hair. So they pluck all his hair and he is imprisoned. But finally, his hair grows back and he regains his strength and destroys the entire place of that is the Hithen temple of Philistines. So Samson Agonistes is important. It is written in 1671 along with Paradise Regained. It was a tragic closet drama. Written sonnets consist of 23 sonnets. It was written in Petrarchan style. On Lake Massacre in Piedmont, on his blindness, it is autobiographical because Milton was also blind. He reflects the loss of his eyesight in this poem. It opens with this famous line, when I consider how my light is spent. So, about Milton, he was treated as a poet of the sublime. That is, Milton's Grand Style is a famous book by Christopher Riggs. So, the term Grand Style was first used by Matthew Arnold. Then, Dryden called Milton the poetical son of Spenser in preface to the fables. Dryden also described him as a poet of the sublime. Wordsworth addresses Milton in his sonnet London 1802. T.S. Eliot wrote a note on the verse of John Milton. Then other important writers of the Jacobean the period there. Thomas Brown. He's famous for he was scientific and religious writer. He was a doctor by profession. He wrote Religio Medici, the religion of a doctor, and it is an examination of his religious views. So that is very important. Thomas Brown's Religio Medici. Thomas Fuller wrote histories of the worthies of England. Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan. Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan. So Leviathan is subtitled The Matter, Form and Power of Commonwealth, Power of the Commonwealth, Ecclesiastical and Civil. It is one of the most influential philosophical texts of the 17th century. So, it argued for a social contract and ruled by an absolute sovereign. Leviathan is also an important text. So, it was one of the most influential philosophical texts of 17th century. So it what the text argued for a social contract and ruled by an absolute sovereign. So we had discussed the important writers of the Jacobean to Puritan period. Okay, with that we'll end today's section. Thank you.